And for all that know New York, yes, I mean that is the case. Growing a business in the city is much different than growing a business, upstate. So it was, very interesting to see how each one of these funds invested in companies at different stages. Some, as early as pre-seed, out of the incubator stage, some at later stages. And overall, that project has produced 17x returns, which is again great it's not great when you're comparing it to the top VC firms that are out there, but when you think about a project that again produces those financial returns, and in addition to that, you're creating 3,000 plus jobs in these economic sectors that will also have that indirect benefit of helping others grow within their town, within their county, or within their region. um, and seeing a couple of the companies again in the overall project become unicorns, and reach that status, is part of the success of that project. Um, ACV Auctions is the largest IPO under that project, and they are out of Buffalo, New York, and they are still in Buffalo, New York, which is great because they employed over 2,000 people in the city and in towns close to that, in Western New York area. Puerto Rico Fund for Growth has been another success story, but different, a little bit different from the New York project. The New York project was strictly VC. The Puerto Rico Fund for Growth is a mix between venture capital funds, private equity funds, and even some private debt funds. And it's a reflection of what some locations truly need in terms of growth financing that you want to make available outside the traditional business. And when I travel and when I meet with people in our network, and learn about other locations around the country, we see a similar need. So we'd like to think that there are opportunities, whether it's for regional organizations, like for example, Appalachian Regional Commission, or the Delta Authority, to develop similar projects. Whether we're involved or not, that's secondary. What we want to see is more stories like this, and it could be a funded fund, or it could be just a dedicated fund. Again, that's pursuing both the financial return and what we would call community development returns, or economic development returns, right? In the form of companies building wealth for that a founder, and then creating those job opportunities that again help people stay in that location, and build on their own dreams in those locations. Which is coming back to the example that you referred to of Puerto Rico earlier. It was great to see a lot of manufacturing and pharma and bio on the island. What was not so great is, seeing support for more entrepreneurial activity in location, which is a challenge, that many states face, because, in various industries, you again, see a lot of development in those industries, but you don't necessarily see entrepreneurial development, in those locations, and it ends up feeling a little bit extractive. So when you think about oil and gas in Louisiana, that's a good example of that, right? I mean, uh, yes, it produces a lot of jobs, and that's great, but is there an intentional effort to produce homegrown companies within that state, in that industry, taking advantage of that activity and leveraging that again to produce local companies.
Yeah, I think I mean, at least for the Gulf South, right? I mean, I feel like there's an entire allegiance of a lot of education on top of industry, sort of additive in those areas, but certainly, to your very good point, right? There are, um, ways that that you could definitely build as well, continue to build the area as well, just by sort of shaping, the right level of engagement as well from both the companies and the private sector. So what are some of the let me ask it this way. How do you source CDFI and NMTC investment opportunities, and what
Mhm.
criteria do you use to select the projects for investment?
Thanks for that question. That sourcing is, in fact, I think the part that I love the most about my job. You get, to meet so many interesting, and passionate founders and entrepreneurs, and and so many great opportunities, investment opportunities. So on the venture capital side, it again, as a CDFI, very specific. When it comes to what you can invest in, it's because it's money from Treasury and the CDFI fund. The CDFI fund, is kind of like sets the rules, right? So what you're looking for are initially for businesses in what Treasury would consider a qualified investment area. And that's purely geographic, and it varies, from state to state what those qualified investment areas are, because it depends on the income levels, within the state. So they will, map out for all CDFIs what are, what would be considered a qualified investment area, and that can, vary from year to year as time goes on. But that's, the first thing that we look for. We look for, businesses in qualified in investment areas. The second thing that we're looking for is a co-investment opportunity. In other words, we want to see, an investment opportunity where there's someone already on board, looking at this investment, and pretty much setting up terms, not because we want to see others set terms, but because we want to ensure that somebody's looking at this deal with the level of expertise, that it requires. Because we focus on low and moderate income communities, cannot afford to be experts in any field. We're looking, for the best investment opportunity in that location, no matter the industry. So it really falls on us to connect folks, with the investors, that can bring that expertise if they're still, not at the table. And so the referral process for us goes both ways. Many times it's through Unlock Capital that we're identifying a company, and presenting that to investors in our network, and trying to say, please take a look at this. We find it very interesting, but we need your expertise to like really complete diligence on this. And at the same time, they're approaching us and saying, hey, I like this opportunity. As you know, I'm in a place where I don't have many sources to go to, and I definitely don't want to be, the biggest player here, meaning, funds tend to set, limits. And this is part of the negotiation with their limited partners, their capital providers, in acknowledging that, you want to refrain from being more than 20 or 25%, as your usual limit in any one investment. And you don't want to be, you don't want an investment to be a large portion of your fund either, right? You have to limit your check size so that you truly have a diversified portfolio. So when you're, making that arrangement with your limited partners, with your investors, you have to, remind yourself, that on the other side, you have to bring in, be able to bring in additional capital, so that you're able, to meet, those requirements and stay within those limitations. So we often, get referrals that way as well, and because of that. So staying agnostic, and focusing, on these areas, where you would, consider them again underinvested, underserved, low and moderate income communities is helpful in that sense.